Perfect. So I appreciate it. And good morning to everybody. It was wonderful to connect with a lot of you. I know it's virtually and in that work, but hopefully some of those conversations were of value to you, just kind of getting things kickstarted. I'm going to go ahead and put in two links here in the chat. The first one is the learning document that we used yesterday. We're going to use that same one today, just now, obviously, for session B. And the other thing that I put in there is today, you're going to have two opportunities to work in breakouts, but really, I want it to be around the people that you work with in your departments, or I know some departments, when I was looking at the breakdowns, there's a lot of you, so maybe it's location based. And so that link is also in the learning doc. But if we could start off here and just in the first couple of minutes, it might just make life easier when we open up the breakout rooms. I'm going to have you manually move yourself to the rooms. It will take you to this page here, and there's 30 rooms. I know yesterday some of you were all in one room, and I'm trying to get you there in a spot. Today, you may have that, you may not. And so sound sorted. Am I sounding like an echo to everybody else? So if I am, okay. If you could just put either your name or initial, I will, on this end, this is just for you to know what room to go in with. Yesterday, a lot of you were trying to sort and get with certain people. And so you can just kind of create your little posses of who you want to work with today. Because today, I'll put up the objectives here in just a second while you're kind of figuring out who you want to work with and move into rooms with. What we want to do today is start off with, I have an incredible opportunity to bring someone in here in the beginning to share some stuff. He is someone that pushes my thinking several times a day as I think about AI, I think about education, I think about what's happening in this landscape. And he's got a pulse and just a lens and a perspective that, sometimes pushes me to think differently, sometimes helps me see things. And so he's been willing to come in here this morning and he's going to share some things. And he's got an opportunity to provide you with a tool that is pretty awesome that he has access to. So we're going to start with some of the implications, getting more into not just like, hey, what is ChatGPT, but probably some of the topics and things that you've been starting to scratch your head around in terms of like, what are we going to do with this? From there, spending a small chunk of time afterwards, then looking at the other large language models. And so we looked at ChatGPT yesterday, but I want to spend a small amount of time for you looking at some of these other platforms and just kind of talking about how they're similar and different and things for you to be aware of, because some of these I find to be more of value in certain pieces of work that we do, and for you just to have an opportunity to kind of to see what's going on with these similar tools that are like ChatGPT. And then we're going to wrap up getting you back into your departments, having some conversations around your current thinking after kind of 2 days of learning as we segue into tomorrow. And so tomorrow we'll take that learning. I have another higher ed person coming in to talk with you tomorrow. She's been doing some work at Iowa State as well as other universities across the nation, sharing some of the things that they're doing to navigate AI and teaching and learning and giving you some of those valuable tips. And so she might jump in here even in this call today just to kind of get a sense of what you guys are thinking and working through so that she can kind of line things up for tomorrow as well. So that's what we've got here for today. And so the question for the document for the breakout rooms, if you are in the learning document, let me put that back in here again for you. Let me grab this. Where'd my link go? There it is. I'll drop these both back in. And the learning document for the breakout rooms is in session B section. I also linked it straight right there for you as well. So what I want to do is start off this morning in your breakout rooms, just a quick little kind of question of the day to get you kind of thinking a little bit about AI here. We're going to go all of 5 to 7 minutes max. Just thinking about what comes to mind when you think about AI in society. So not education, just the bigger picture of society. And this will just make sure that we've got our breakout rooms kind of adjusted and thinking that way. And what I have in there is that same kind of slide deck we used yesterday when we used what is AI. And if you could, just list some of the benefits and concerns that you're thinking. And this is going to set up really well with Stefan when he takes over here in about 10 minutes. So this is just going to kind of get you activated, acquainted with your people, make sure you know how to get into your breakout rooms, quick little 5-minute chat. I'm going to pull you back and then we're going to move into the learning. So as I open up these breakout rooms, I'm going to open up 30 of them and you are going to choose. So this time you're not going to be automatically directed to a room. So you're going to find your room that you signed up for and join in there. So these will open up here now. And then I will give you about 5 minutes, have some conversation, throw some ideas in the doc, and then we'll bring you back and get going with the learning. So I'm going to open these up here now, and you should have access to be able to move yourself to your room accordingly. And if you need help, I can help you as we get going. So, all right, looks like we've got almost everybody back. So as we navigate the breakout rooms with this many people, I know it always takes just a little bit of time to get coordinated, but hopefully we kind of all know where we're going to be, and that'll make it easier here for later in the session. And that's really just design. I want to make sure that we get a chance for you to have some conversation with people doing the same work that you're doing in the same field, because AI does have different implications depending on our role in the work that we're doing. So I want to move this over to our guest here today with Stefan. I will let him introduce himself, but in the learning document, I do have his bio, so you can kind of get a sense of the work that he's doing, just that work here. I will reshare this learning doc for everybody here. He is one, as I shared earlier, is just doing some profound work, does do a great job of making you think about the stuff. He's someone that I look forward to each day to kind of see his thoughts and ideas, and really kind of pushes my own thinking as we think about what it means for education and teaching. And so you can see his work, his LinkedIn profile there, his newsletter, which is top notch, always very thorough. So I know you got to plan for about 20, 30 minutes to read his newsletters, but very, very deep and insightful as you're working through that. And he also has a book where he brought together lots of different AI voices into a 600-page behemoth of just lots of really curated thoughts where you can really kind of just, think more about it. And so I will let him take over. I'll stop sharing my screen, let him jump on. He's got some stuff he wants to share with you. And we're going to use this as a launch to get into thinking a little more deeper about implications of AI, what we're going to do with AI, and things for us to think about when it comes to teaching and learning. And in your guys' case for higher ed, which does have sometimes its own separate things to think about versus K-12, which has its own kind of subcategories. But the ecosystem all in the end is how do we ensure that our kids are equipped to be able to think on their own and also navigate this world where AI seems to be everywhere. So Stefan, I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully you can take over your screen there, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to jump onto this call today. And I'm excited to learn along with everybody else here in this next little bit.
All right. I think I made it. Can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron, for that very, very kind introduction. The one thing Aaron said was that, I kind of throw a lot of ideas out there. My background actually is in academic debate. All the way middle school through college, I've dealt with it all and still involved with it in many ways. And part of it is just to get ideas out there. I think we need to kind of get more ideas into the space. We don't really know where we're going to end up for sure, but we know we're going to end up somewhere that wasn't exactly 2022. I think that those are some things. I think they're kind of like two fundamental questions, and that is kind of, one is well, how do we integrate this into human-led education? Right? How when we're working with students, whether it's writing a paper, doing a presentation, in terms of maybe using AI as a TA, if you're in K-12 and they call it a lesson plan, or you're in higher ed and you're just trying to map out what what you're going to do for your hour and a half during the day. How do we use all these things, in that context, is tools, maybe a little bit more throughout that educational process. Then I think the second question, which I actually think kind of doesn't get enough attention really, is how do we prepare students for this world? If, in K-12, if a teacher uses AI for a lesson plan or writes it on his or her own, that's probably not really going to impact that unless somehow the lesson plan is a little bit better, a little bit worse. What is going to impact how prepared they may be for this world is, what do we do to actually prepare them for this world? So I'm going to just kind of go over a few kind of sections. So one is what I see as realities, don't shoot the messenger, then challenges and opportunities we have, and a few questions to put into groups. And I'll go through each of these. And So first of realities, I think students are using AI, and there's really no like much effective means to prevent them. Sure, there's stuff at the margins. If somebody copies their whole paper from an older version of ChatGPT, you can obviously tell. But for the most part, there's really not much we can do about it. The AI readiness actually becoming a part of college readiness, and I'll give some examples of that. It's obviously a huge part of work. And it's definitely part of entrepreneurship, even young kids who are being entrepreneurs. I have a high school student I work with in debate. He's in ninth grade. He built up an Instagram following using AI. He has over 100,000 followers. So he's built himself a business there that can generate revenue, and then, how our lives are going to change. So here's just kind of like one survey on student use. I mean, there's different surveys, and depending on how they ask the questions, obviously, about survey design, you get a little bit different results. But they generally kind of find that around 86% of students are using AI one way or another in their studies. And the most interesting thing of the study is that 54% admit to using it when they've been told like not to use it or not to use it in a particular way. And, then there's this little I guess chart table thing on the right. I made that very easily. I just went into Claude. I don't know if you talked about Claude yesterday, or you can talk about it today. I can mention it later when I show you some other tools. And I literally just asked Claude in the projects. I just copied and pasted what I had from the article there, where I found the survey, and it made me that, right? So you can see how I made it there, and it just produced it. I mean, that's obviously like a very basic thing. I made myself a Space Invaders video game with no line of code like whatsoever. Hadn't written a lot of code since I was actually in the 7th grade. So you can do a lot there. I think the second reality is, beyond like why is student use so high? Well, there's three primary modes of assessment, right? Like there's papers, there's products, which you can some kind of a presentation, the thing that you make, and AI can do that. And the AIs we have now are really good at doing cognitive work, and that's why students go to universities, right? Colleges, universities, K-12, they're in there to develop, however you want to define it. We could have day-long seminars and discussions about intelligence and all these types of things, but they're generally there to boost their intelligence, which is what artificial intelligence is designed to do. All right, so detection fails. A couple examples, you may have seen this. This recently came out. Somebody sent some AIs to a class, had them do all the coursework. I think the AI got completely undetected. Nobody knew that the AI was there, like doing all the work, and they ended up, I think, with a final grade of a 99.36. Most of our students don't end up with a grade that high. That was a graduate course. Obviously, with kind of the detection systems themselves, I can talk more about why they don't really work. I'll give one example in a second. But there's just a lot of studies that just show the AI writing is not detected. And like I said, if you use an older AI that had like a more particular writing pattern, then it would get picked up more, obviously, just with a percentage score. But they're more likely to work. The systems are getting more sophisticated. They don't just write like kind of AI patterns anymore. So that makes it difficult. And one big problem is students can use things like undetectable.ai, even if they don't want to bother go through and adding a few spelling errors or grammar errors, changing the length to the paragraph, like doing any of their own writing. They can use one of these tools. And basically the way the tool works is that the tool one AI just tries to make it more and more like a human. The other AI kind of keeps trying to detect it. And it just kind of goes in a circle until you get to the point where the detector can't really tell that it's an AI anymore based on the changes that the first AI is making. And this kind of collapses the workability of it. There's also like within the tools themselves, like Claude. I haven't done this. I played around with it a little bit, but you can basically train all these AIs to write like yourself. So you can take a pile of last semester's papers and load them up into the AI and be like, kind of learn how to write with me, like me, and it'll produce the output pretty much how you would produce it. And, just more and more research, like detection fails. Aaron mentioned my blog. You can look on there. It's like through March, and then I added a couple more, but I just kind of cataloged all the studies. And there's really no solution to it, right? Because the writing is becoming more human. Right? Like AI writing detectors work based on like determining a pattern that's kind of like AI writing. So as AI writing becomes more human and less AI-like, there's really no way for the AI detector to pick it up. So there's really not like a technological solution to that unless like you're monitoring keystrokes or something like across a student. And then of course, there are kids who are getting falsely accused. of this. There was another study I forgot to include in the presentation where like the self-report was about 14% of college students, and it was in Ireland, right? But 14% of college students say they were falsely accused at least once during the semester. So, were they all like punished, maybe failed, thrown out of school? No, but that, that's a lot for kids to kind of deal with, right? Being kind of constantly falsely accused of writing papers. Some teachers think they can just spot the AI. There have been a lot of studies that show that just doesn't work. They'll give people papers that were written by AIs and people written by humans, and they just like mess up all the time, like which category the one goes into. And then the other problem is that there's kind of just AI everywhere, right? Like there's kind of like use AI for this, don't use AI for that. Assumes that like you go to ChatGPT and then you use AI and then like you're done or you're not done. But if you've been using Google searches, you can see the Gemini, like it's right in there. It just kind of spits out the AI like right when you do the search. So it's embedded. It's embedded in word processors now. It's embedded in the Google Docs. For the new versions of the iPhone, it's embedded. You actually kind of have to turn it off, like if you don't want it. It's getting embedded in more learning management software. People have it on their watch. I don't know if you've seen the eyeglasses, like the Meta glasses. I mean, basically, you could, if you're taking a French test and you look down, like you can have it just translate it right into English, like right through the glasses, right through your glasses. Or if you see an object, it'll tell you what it is. People say this is going to come into contact lenses. So even if you can kind of catch the Meta glasses, most people don't even realize people are wearing Meta glasses. It's right there. It's in your browser. Like if you download the new versions of Edge, there's kind of like AI writing tools. So there's just kind of AI everywhere, right? It's kind of seamlessly becoming integrated, and obviously it's going to become more integrated. So when you say like don't use AI, it's kind of like where, right? It'd be like, if a student lived at home and you said like, don't talk to your family member about your assignment, right? Like it's just kind of a little bit, obviously it's like coming into the world of work and, some aggressive ways. I mean, obviously people are starting to use the AI tools at work for writing and, some of them may be restricted as to what type of tool, or maybe they can't use it right now because the company doesn't have an enterprise system. So, they're worried that like the data will leak into the system or whatever, but it's coming, it's in a lot of places. There's these agents now that can do two things. Claude has one that'll take control of your computer and, allow it to use like Microsoft Word, like browse on the internet, book planes, buy pizzas. ChatGPT just kind of pushed theirs out yesterday. These things are still pretty nascent, but it's not just going to be like at the website. Like you're going to be able to tell the AIs to do things on your computer, like use your Excel, like those types of things. Part of college admissions, Northeastern rolled this out this year. If you applied to Northeastern, you could take a free AI course. I'm working on a course with a friend of mine for his university. For admitted students, they're going to be able to take a 1-credit AI course, intro to AI course over the summer. And then if they take that, they're going to be able to take a kind of like a larger AI course that he'll lead. And then, I'm going to be one of the TAs, and some of the other people externally located will be one of the TAs. So this is, kind of coming into the university environment. Here's how you can send your avatar to a Zoom meeting and conduct business for you. And this is kind of like how they see like knowledge work kind of being automated, right? So right now it's just like information handling, right? Like we're just responding to emails, like writing drafts, helping like write papers or parts of papers. And then it's going to start being able to help analyze data, and eventually kind of able to do kind of science, like scientific research. I mean, there's I forget the name of it. It's called like the AI scientist. And it wasn't bad, but the people who did it had it write some papers, and their kind of general thought, right? These were scientists, right? The papers would be accepted to conferences, like competitive conferences, not necessarily for publication yet. Maybe they weren't quite there. Though other people have done publications that papers they thought would get accepted for publication, but probably at least at like, okay, conference level papers. Challenges, I mean, there are a lot of challenges, right? Like I think we can talk about like adapting our curriculum and preparing our students for this world, but a lot of times, and this kind of governs K-12 a little more sometimes than higher ed, but still to agree to higher ed with licensing bodies, you have things you have to teach, right? And you say, okay, well, I'm teaching this thing, like I don't really know that, like, now that like, the AI is able to do a lot of these things in the workforce, or even just like a lot of these things for a student, like, in their normal day-to-day interaction, like, why am I teaching them how to do this manually? But you still have to teach you how to do it manually, because they need to know how to do it manually to pass the test for your like accreditation or some other tests. And I put under expectations, maybe we're giving tests to kids for things to them to learn, that they don't really need to learn anymore, right? Like you say, when we passed from the agriculture era to the industrial era, what students needed to learn changed. And, things obviously change like within a major, maybe what you need to learn changes, but that usually takes a while. Like we have committees and all these things, we have licensing bodies. They take years to make changes. Well, AI is not waiting. Businesses can make changes like in a week. The expectations versus the time frame are hard. I think for faculty, just finding the time to learn. I mean, honestly, like I've learned a lot. I've self-taught myself a lot of this, but basically just because I use like all of my own free time to learn. And, that kind of creates some challenges. I don't know what you talked about in your breakouts, but, some people do have moral concerns. I don't really think they're going to slow down AI at all, but, some people have concerns, okay, we're using like too much AI for like climate change, or, there's intellectual property questions. And, I think these are a lot of like fair issues. I just don't really see them slowing down like business or like military adoption of AI. That's going to be the world like our kids kind of merge into. And of course, there are no definitive answers or guarantee. I mean, we have ideas about how to prepare kids for the AI world. I think most people are starting to think about like, well, how to use AI to like augment yourself? Like, how do you work with it? How do you use it to like make yourself better? How do you use it to come up with a business idea? Like, how do you use it to get like work done faster? How do you use it to do better work? But we don't know that's the answer, or that like AI might just be able to do everything anyhow. Right? Like how, what am I adding to it as a human? Like as these systems become smarter than us, and if you use them enough, you'll realize they're like really good at things you even think you're really good at. Like, I'm just like, wow, I thought I was really good at this, but like, yeah, I couldn't have done it like that. Like what the AI did was just better. And that's going to kind of start to disturb people a little bit. There's a little bit of disbelief, right? So this is from Jeffrey Hinton, who basically kind of made a deep learning, which is an extension of kind of machine learning. It's just like has a lot more nuance and sophistication, which is why these things work. Like here's a little video. Could people hear that or no? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he basically said like, I agree with him. Like if you read all the experts, some people say, oh, they're like, some of them are industry hacks, but a lot of them are not in industry. A lot of them are like independent researchers or academics. Pretty much everyone agrees this thing and like is going to be smarter than us in basically every way that we're smart, except maybe edge cases. Edge cases are like human to human. They're going to be smarter than us, and when you think of our students, some of us that may not affect, like, I could retire from my day job in like 2 years, but a lot of kids, they're not even going to graduate in 2 years from high school, let alone like from college or like some other type of program. So like, I think of my own kids. My one son just graduated college. My other son's going to college. When they're my age, like these systems are going to be mind-boggling. They're probably going to be mind-boggling in like 5 or 10 years, right? So, this is going to kind of change their worlds. And if, there's some professors here who are just getting started, it's going to really disrupt yours as well. Like, this is just another thing that's this is like a little bit tamer, right? So there's two questions of intelligence. Like, does it have like all the intellectual capabilities of a human? I think that's kind of like an interesting academic discussion, and it helps us point in the direction. But it really just kind of matters like work-wise, like what they can do. And this is kind of basically what these agents are starting to do right now. This was filmed in August 2023. So, and he's saying here, you'll hear him say 3 to 5 years. It's probably more looking like 3 now because they're already kind of nascent.
Right. The last Turing test simply evaluated for what a machine could say, assuming that what it could say represented its intelligence. Now that we're kind of approaching that moment where these AI models are pretty good, arguably they've passed the Turing test, or maybe they will in the next few years. The real question is, how can we measure what they can do? So I proposed a test which involves them going off and taking $100,000 investment, and over the course of 3 months, trying to set about creating a new product, researching the market, seeing what consumers might like, generating some new images, some blueprints of how to manufacture that product, contacting a manufacturer, getting it made, negotiating the price, drop shipping it, and then ultimately collecting the revenue. And I think that over a 5-year period, it's quite likely that we will have an ACI, an artificial capable intelligence, that can do the majority of that task autonomously. It won't be able to do the whole thing. There are many tricky steps along the way, but significant portions of that. It will be able to make phone calls to other humans to negotiate. It will be able to call other AIs in order to establish the right sequence in a supply chain, for example. And of course, it will learn to use APIs, application programming interfaces, so other websites or other knowledge bases or other information stores. And so, the world is your oyster. You can imagine that being applied to many, many different parts of our economy.
And those things at the end, like calling humans, right, in the supply chain, yeah, it can already do those things. What I like is the woman, I forget her name, but she works for The Economist, and you can see kind of the shocked look on her face. If you watch podcasts with her now or doing interviews, like she's not shocked anymore. So, it's interesting to just kind of see the transition of how people act. We're also kind of like, there's a lot of changes like going on in the world. Some people like them, some people don't, but regardless, like, there's pretty big changes, like domestically, like geopolitically. So those are kind of all coming on top of this, probably what some people think is probably like the biggest change in human history in terms of technology, if you want to think of it that way. All right, opportunities. It can be a little overwhelming, but I think kind of people in university environments should be like they're kind of the most capable of like managing this, right? Like the universities are like full of smart people who know a lot of stuff. And, you have like various departments or schools within like colleges or universities that you kind of have like a lot of collective knowledge of ways to kind of think through things that you don't have in other environments. And, some people don't have it all. It impacts everything. How you're in your groups, right? It's going to impact, healthcare, food sciences, writing. Obviously, that was the biggest impact, right? It's going to impact every part of society. So everybody kind of has an interest in contributing. University admins, I think we had one on here to start, and some professors don't like the admins. University admins are probably nicer than like corporate admins, right? Like, we see all these corporations, they're just like, oh, we don't really need you anymore. We have plenty of money, but like, we're not going to bother trying to find something else for you to do. We're just going to fire you. University admins, university's it's a pretty good place to work in this environment, I think. I think the other thing is, continuing education will be necessary. So it may really disrupt current education. It may in some way reduce some of roles for human teachers and professors, but people are going to need continually educating, which kind of like increases the net amount of like, what's needed, I think. And that humans are an important part of education, right? Like it is human to human, right? There's all these debates about like, okay, well, we still need people to motivate people. That's true. Now, it'll be like, well, okay, but can the AIs like they're going to know all the content, right? So are the best teachers kind of become the best motivators, the best facilitators, the best like collaborators? You may have seen this Alpha School. It's a new school where the kids learn the content basically from AIs in the morning, and they're supported by guides. And then in the afternoon, the guides kind of guide them through project-based learning and entrepreneurship type programs, right? So it kind of changes what the teachers are doing during the day. But there's still human teachers, right? No one's sending their kids yet to school with just a physical robot. I mean, that may happen to a degree, but I mean, maybe not a physical robot, but a digital, right? We have homeschooling. This opens a lot of opportunities for homeschooling. Parents who sent their kids to high school because they couldn't teach them physics. This completely changes that game. So, that's something that's interesting, but that's not like an elimination of education. That's a change. There's a lot of things you can do. I'm a big debate person. I think debate can help a lot. The AI can't debate for you. Mike Kent has this thing called like grade the chat, where you're like kind of grading the chat. It's a little harder to implement sometimes because, they got to keep track of all the chat logs, but it's there. I do think using AI when done properly involves like a lot of critical thinking, like thinking through like how you're going to prompt it is very, very important. The average keyword search on Google is like 1.6 words. Like in order to have a good prompt, like on an AI, you're looking at like sentences, if not paragraphs. Then it doesn't end there, right? It's a conversation that goes back and forth. So it's just like if a student comes to see you and like they ask you a question, you give an answer, maybe they don't fully understand. How do they next question, or how do you like take them to the next level? It's interactive. You can ask the system for counterpoints about things you believe in. How do you reason like collaboratively when you're working through it? Your own metacognition, like how do you start to sense your own weaknesses and where the AI can help you? Because it's there 24/7, right? Like you don't need to worry about bothering your professor with a late night email, though I don't think kids care about that anymore, but you get the idea, right? It can answer your question 24/7. How do you act on uncertainty? Like how do you engage in continuous learning throughout your life? I mean, science is changing, even just like how research is being conducted, right? Like the whole like hypothesis thing. Now you can just like give it all the data and ask it to like kind of find patterns or ideas. It'll find a lot of ideas. You don't have to like first kind of like have the idea in your hypothesis and then go look for data to see if it validates it. I mean, you can still do that, but like, you can also just feed it piles of data and like see what it comes up with. So those are some things. So I think there's some like questions, to think about, like, within the curricular constraints, like how might like we help students prepare for an AI world, right? Like depending on, what you're teaching, like, okay, like, within these constraints that I have, like, how could I give them a chance to like work with AI? How could I learn from AI? How can we learn together without kind of like, abandoning, 90% of what I need to teach them? The second thing, if there were no curricular constraints, if you could just kind of redesign your course with the objective of, students being like competitive in the job market or maybe in the entrepreneurship market, if there are fewer jobs, what would you do? I think that's worth thinking about, because eventually those conversations are going to have to happen, or they're not going to happen for the spring. How could we integrate more intelligence into learning environments? Like, it is different than other forms of technology in that it is intelligence. I mean, you can unpack that more, but what is intelligence? It's knowledge, it's communication, it's reasoning. It clearly has more knowledge. All these systems already have more knowledge than any human being. They can probably communicate better than we can. They don't reason as well as we do, but most people think that's kind of inevitable, right? They're going to be able to backwards plan. So how do we integrate that like into a learning environment? Should we expect more of our students? I think this is like one of the critical questions that's really hard to wrap people's heads around. Like, like even just take like your best papers that you're used to like getting. Like, how much better should those be? Right? Like, obviously they shouldn't have any spelling errors or like any grammar errors. All right. Like, it's almost like what the AI produces should be like the first draft, right? Like, it's like as soon as a kid has a paper assignment, they should almost just like write it, like even like write in class or like while they're sitting at lunch, and then build from there. Right. Like if you're getting them research projects and now they can do synthetic subject research, like how much better should their research be? So I think that's ultimate, because ultimately, if we're just going to expect people to do with AI what only humans could do, then they're going to be able to do it as well or better with the AI. How do you want to spend your time? There's a lot of time invested now in like catching kids cheating on papers. If you're a young professor, you're gonna do that for the next like 30 years. Like what are we gonna do? And then kind of like what other questions should we be asking? Those are my questions. I like coming to these things too because I learn things. Like, what are the fundamental questions?
So, Stefan, as you're talking about this with these questions, I know speaking with some of these folks here in this session and other sessions and through email and conversation, one of your questions there, like within the system itself, I'm just curious if you've seen any proactive examples. I know a lot of this here is around, academic dishonesty, but these places where, classes are online, exams must be given online. And how are people navigating that? I mean, it's one thing to say, come in and proctor and see it in person, but if those aren't within the system implications, yes, we know kids can use AI and these types of things, and without it becoming like a huge security breach where you've got cameras on in the kids' room all over scanning to see if they've got devices off to the side or on their laps. I mean, this kind of weird, like security thing where like let's track every movement. No one wants that either, and I know that that's very extreme. But I'm just curious because I know that you talk with a lot of people, you're working with universities, you're seeing things. I know a lot of people in this call are trying to grapple with how do we proactively start to think about how to still ensure that kids are doing some learning and be able to think on their own. Yes, we know there's AI, but we also have some of these other things in play where the exam is online. The way the discussions are, they are online. And that's not going to necessarily like magically shift tomorrow because there's AI. I mean, I know there's things we need to be thinking about. Have you seen anything just for them to start to like grapple with a little bit about where could we start to explore a little further?
I mean, like there's kind of like two questions in there, right? Like even maybe multiple instances, right? Like, so like instant, like instant one, like, okay, the kid gets to take like an online test at home. Okay. Like, what can you do to stop a kid from cheating? Literally, other than monitoring keystrokes, like there are no solutions. A kid can sit there and have like another computer right next to them and like ask it all the questions. And the only way they're going to get it wrong is like if the system hallucinates. But like a smart kid's going to know like how to really reduce the hallucinations by training it all on its course material, like reducing the temperature, like all these kind of things. Like they're not right. And even then, like, okay, what does that mean? Like they get one thing wrong, like two things wrong on the test, right? So like, to me, like I always think the equivalent is more like, okay, well, I'm gonna give a take-home test, and I'm gonna tell the students it's closed book, and they can't open the book or like talk to anybody, and I'm just going to assume that they haven't. Okay, I mean that's what that is, right? So, and if that has to stay in the system, it has to stay in the system. But there's no way to guarantee like the integrity of that test, like absent like some type of like keystroke monitoring that's like how fast, and even then it gets like sophisticated, like how fast are they doing it, maybe putting like cameras in it, like maybe something you do for like a high, like, if somebody's taking like a test to like, whatever the final test to be like a doctor or something like that, like, right, that you would have that level of security for, right? And then, even, and, Jason Gulia, you can look on his LinkedIn, right? Because he teaches a lot, the big challenge people face are these like asynchronous classes, right? Where it's like, well, you don't even meet with the students, right? You're not really supposed to meet with the students. So you can't have the debate. Like, yeah, they can just have AIs like create all the content. Like there's no way around that. Like I even like you can create an avatar that's basically of yourself that's basically like indistinguishable from you. I don't even know how you could distinguish it. I created an avatar of myself in 90 seconds. And I showed it to people and they had no idea it wasn't me. And then you could have like ChatGPT write their speech and like they, public speaking, like online, asynchronous, they deliver the speech. I mean, you might know, but even then, like you're probably not really going to know. So there's certain ways of doing things. Like there just aren't like, people want there to be a solution. There aren't solutions. Like you can't necessarily continue. I'm going to say maybe somebody will come up with something, but you can't necessarily just continue everything you're doing, given how radical this technology is, and expect there to be a solution. Like there just isn't a solution to like continuing all current practices and then saying like, well, I know that students aren't going to use the technology in this way. Like that's just like a reality. Beyond that, like, what are people doing to like, manage things? Like there's more like flipped classroom approaches. Like if you have like a regular, classroom, like do more activities online, do more like performance-based evaluations, whether they're giving a presentation, having a debate, they got to build up to like some type of portfolio, right? All those things kind of like happening within the classroom itself. Some people, within the kind of like, how do you, use this technology with your students? Like that's a subset. I mean, a lot of people are building bots as like teaching assistants. I don't know if you all have seen like Notebook LLM. That's probably the easiest one to use. You can just upload all your content, do a podcast, and now you can even interact with the podcasters so they can ask questions. It's basically like a virtual TA, but that's what I'm saying. So there's three different levels, right? There's like, there's no way to know, like absent extreme monitoring, like whether or not they're using these systems. And that's just like a reality. And then the second thing is that, I mean, an unfortunate reality, but like it's a reality. And then the second way is like, well, how could you alter your classroom practices? So like more like kind of the performative type things are done in class. So it's kind of not as relevant. And then there's the third thing of like, well, how could you use these systems to like, so it's more likely the students are going to learn more, have more opportunities to learn. I mean, they can use these basic things to like generate like flashcards, like review questions before the test, like, practice, like for an interview, if you have some kind of class where you're like interview them for something, right? Like there's tons of ways that the students use it properly to advance the learning of the content that like you're trying to teach them, like, and that's why too, like sometimes you'll see these studies and these studies will be like, oh, well, AI reduced like critical thinking. And then someone like, oh, here's a study that says increased critical thinking. But you realize that the two ways that you used are like completely different. Right. One is like, well, the student used it to do like their whole coding project and they didn't learn how to code. Well, obviously, right. If I had my friend do my whole coding project, I wouldn't learn how to code. Right. If I kind of used it, I didn't understand something in the coding project and I asked it to explain it to me and give me like some examples. And then I built my thing, I'd probably learn more. Right. So it kind of totally depends how it's used. But I would say in general, it's just, whether it's writing a paper, whether it's like an asynchronous course, the idea that you can kind of really, there's any real way to, absent extreme surveillance, catch people using AI. I mean, the ship's kind of off the dock or like leaving the dock or like, and there's not even going to like kind of be a ship to leave in like 2 years. So kind of trying to figure that out, like that's kind of like the reverse direction that like you want to go, because even if you can find a little way to do it here or there, because now like the technology hallucinates a little bit or kind of writes in a more generic way, or like some kid doesn't know how to use it, so they get caught by the writing detector. Like those are like stopgap measures that like only work, like, because the other thing that's coming into these systems is memory. So as the memory expands, it basically just gets to know you and everything you do. So it's even easier to write like you, to do your project, like all these kind of things, right? So it's just kind of like heading the wrong way. It's okay for a stopgap, but it's not like, oh, fall 26, we're going to get this working really well. So like I say, don't shoot the messenger. But I'd feel dishonest if I didn't give you the message.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's probably a lot of people just like, well, then what do we do, right? I'm looking at here in the chat. There's some questions about the idea around like safety and security concerns. Some stuff here, like, is there research, or are there things that we could start to bring into our classrooms where we can help students realize it's not like no AI, but more on like the importance of like also being able to think critically about AI, and also realize we need to also continue to learn how to think critically on our own 2 feet. Not in the sense of like all AI must go away and AI is bad. So as I'm thinking about, I don't know, maybe you can talk a bit more about like your AI course. Like, how do we start to help students realize that like AI is not the authority? It's not the end all be all. I plug it in and therefore it's all there. But like, we still need to know how to function. If my phone battery dies and I'm driving and I have no sense of direction. I mean, I know that's like a simple example, but like the idea of like, I still would have to figure out how to get home. Like, it doesn't mean I have to have all streets memorized like the old days, but like at least kind of have to know the importance of north, south, east, west, and some just basic, navigation skills. And I know that's probably not the greatest example. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, part of it's the messaging. And I think, to be honest, part of the messaging originally has been wrong. Like, part of the original message was like, you're better than an AI. You can do something better than an AI. You can write better than an AI. You can write, you can do better statistical analysis than an AI. Yeah, that was true in the spring of 2023. I really don't know that in a lot of those instances is true anymore. And it's certainly not going to be true, if you look at the totality of what people say in 2, 3, 5 years. We don't have to get to super intelligence for that to be true. So the messaging needs to shift to like, you need to work with AI to make yourself better. Like competing against AI is like having a race against a car. Like you're just not going to win, right? So you have to shift. That messaging has to shift. I think the reality of what's happening like has to be more clearly communicated to like students. Like they just kind of hear about this like secondhand, right? Like they don't realize like, a lot of people don't realize like what's coming. Joe Biden, some people don't like him, but he said it last night, right? This is the biggest change in human history, right? And people are kind of just thinking, well, I'm just going to go on. I mean, the kids who teach coding, the kids who are learning coding, it's starting to hit them because A, they kind of see that like space a little bit more. And B, like they realize like a lot of what they can do, they're being taught to do in class, like the systems can already do. And then, when you combine these systems with like applications like Cursor and like all these kind of things, right? So a lot of people are going to kind of start to hit that moment, and there has to be like some conversations with students. Like that's why we're having this, class at my friend's university. It's not just to kind of because some kids are going to come in knowing a lot and some kids are going to come in knowing nothing, and that makes it hard on all the professors, right? But also to kind of just build awareness, right, as to what changes are happening. And then, I think ultimately kids have to be empowered. We kind of have to shift the framework from like, I'm going to tell you to do this stuff. You're going to do it. If you buy your paper online or you pay someone to do your homework, then like you're going to get in trouble and you're going to go through the like academic dishonesty board. So that kind of, they're scared straight, right? And then, like to a degree, like, that kind of worked for like the current workforce, right? It probably became less true over time, right? It certainly worked in the quote unquote factory, and, it worked in, environments where people had routinized work to do every day. And if they didn't do their routinized work, they're going to get in trouble. Well, AIs can do routinized work like really well. So people are going to be successful in the future aren't going to be people who learned how to do routinized work and like kind of became compliant and like didn't cheat. And I'm not saying that people who cheat are going to be successful. What I'm saying is like AIs are going to be able to do like a lot of that, right? They do a lot of like basic accounting, like basic bookkeeping, like basic like secretarial work, like right, basic like just kind of office like anything that's kind of somewhat regularized is going to be really easy for AIs to do, right? So the people who are kind of like, like kind of being pushed through the like educational system and kind of develop like, some skills and knowledge through kind of like forced learning, like I don't really even know where that's going to get them. It's kids, it's like, but this is what scares me. Two things scares me. I think that people are going to be successful in this world are people who have type A personalities. Everybody's going to have a type A personality, right? So one question is like, how do we cultivate that in our students? How do we go from like everyone needs, from the status quo to like everyone needs to be a leader, everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. Like people who are bringing like original ideas, people who are bringing, like, I mean, a lot of people go work with other smart people. AIs can be really smart, but you can work with someone who you kind of think, well, the person's smarter than me, but obviously you go to work every day and like you contribute and you come up with new ideas, right? So no matter how smart the AIs are, there's always going to be room for that. I think that's a problem, right? Because that's not really a current focus. We even just see we've probably spent hundreds of millions of hours in the last 2 years trying to catch kids cheating, right? So all the focus is kind of in the wrong direction, in my opinion. And I think, but the second thing that scares me is, everybody will say this. Well, people are going to have to do they're going to have to do even more work, even higher level work, higher level thinking. I mean, we've all worked with students where like just kind of getting them through the class has been like a struggle, right? Like they've been trying, we work with them, like we really help them with their papers. Like they kind of like maybe got a C, but we give them a B because like they work really hard, right? Like how is somebody like that going to like just kind of manage like in this world where like the AIs can like do so much and there's so much information and it's really the people who are like kind of managing like all the complex ideas and just can kind of, crank out, I'm curious about this. So I'll just do a synthetic study research this afternoon and kind of see what it produces. And, I'll have the AI write the paper and then I'll think through it tonight before I fall asleep. Right? Like how many people are really going to be able to do those kind of things? And that's kind of that does scare me. And I don't really have any like good questions, but answers to that. But I think raising awareness in the direction of like, it's going to, I mean, I don't think you want to tell a kid who's not type A, they have to be type A, but it's the kids who are going to be leaders, the people who are going to be leaders, the people who are successful, the people who take responsibility, who want to learn, right? Like, I basically work with debaters, right? I don't teach a regular class, to too many other students. I do sometimes, but, most of the debaters, like in America, like they're kind of nerdy and like they're ambitious, like, they're running up the score with like AIs for the last 2 years. Like my debaters have been using it to like in the debates to like prepare, to like help generate questions, to do answers, to build like practice tests for their classes, to do flashcards, to learn about things that they never would otherwise be able to learn about. And some of these kids were already taking other online classes from like local colleges or, companies like at the end of the day. Right. So you have like those kids who are just kind of like, AI just enables them to like pole vault like academically, like even farther than they were. And then there's other kids who are like trying to use it to like write a paper and like not get caught. And even if like we can catch those kids and kind of get them through to do their work, like I'm glad they're learning things, but I don't really know, where they're going to be, because you can, I can look at those kids and say, okay, I could 10 years ago be like, oh, I can tell who's going to be the bosses of like, who's going to be the worker and like who's going to be the bosses, right? Like giving, absent, like other variables intervening. Like if I had to bet, okay, but I worry about is like, okay, those kids are like going to be the bosses. Their workers are going to be AIs. They're not going to be those other kids, right? Who they like have to drag to work, who they have to remind them not to take more than the maximum number of sick days, right? Who don't have to like constantly ask, for time off for like vacation, right? Like, and I think those are kind of some of the fundamental questions that we have to address in the short term. Sure, we, do our best to like catch a kid writing a paper because, this is what we got to do, or like, the asynchronous course. But in reality, like to me, like those are not like the fundamental questions. They're important questions and things people have to manage with, but it's really just managing them, because I don't think there's a solution to giving a kid a take-home test when there's like AI on their phone.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely a lot to think about and process. And I think there's some good things coming in here in the chat as people are trying to process all the things of these things that you're sharing. And this is why I'm thankful for you carved out some time here to talk with us this morning, because it's it's important stuff. It's not always, you don't walk out of here doing jumping jacks, excited about the things, but what are we going to do? How are we going to pivot? I'm thinking about here in the state of Iowa, how do we continue to stay relevant in our education system? How do we continue to get kids to find the value in learning and a lot of those human type skills to go along with these things where maybe we have put so much emphasis on the academic side of the child, and how do we start to, that whole child type piece. I mean, I don't know what the answers are, but I think it's sometimes we do need these gut reality checks to go, okay, so now what? What are we going to do? Because that's the beauty of educators is we don't ever give up. Well, we may not always like the systems, but one things are educators are definitely relentless in the pursuit of trying to figure out to do what's best for kids. And so it's definitely an important message that I appreciate you taking time to share. And I know we've got about
Can I just say, like, two other things? I mean, just like I just had a chance to skim through the chat and get all of it. But yeah, I think alternative Westman is one. But I think the other way to think about the kids, like I think about my own kids, like I mentioned, right? One of them just graduated for college and he got like an internship job, which means, they pay you, but they don't pay you well. But it's like, pretty good. And I was just like, he was like, should I take this? Like, I was like, take it. I was like, and keep it. Because I don't know, like what, keep it, make a good impression, right? So that's like a very practical thing. My other son, I just read his college essay and I was like, wow, this is like really good. And it was really personal. But then I was like, oh man, I was thinking he could be a writer, but then I'm like, wow, do I really, what I want him to be a writer? Like, unless he's like, I think if you're like one of the best writers, you're still gonna be a writer, right? But like, I don't know that I want him like, writing like a technical manual. I think that'll be done with AI. But the second thing, then he said in the essay he wanted to be he talked about like how people are like defined by like certain things that they don't want to be defined about. And he gave a couple of examples of like ways he had been defined. And he said, he referenced some people in history had been like defined in certain ways and they became other things, right? And they achieved other things than how they were originally defined. And he said he wanted to be a history major because he wanted to learn about more like how these people did it and other people like them. If this was 5 years ago, I'd be like, come on, I'd be like, man, you got to like have a major and like get a job. He needs to, this is like really important. Like he's gonna, right? Like, kind of thinking through resiliency, like thinking through like how to overcome things, like learning examples of like people who did this. Like I'm excited for him. Like, and I think maybe that'll be the best path to a job. So I think some of the things like we even kind of think, right? Like, and then the last thing I'll know is like, yeah, we don't really know. Like maybe things won't, it does take a while to, people, okay, the technology is like, if you know how to use it, and I'm not like a super technical person, but I can use some of the stuff like pretty well. But like some people know how to use it all. And like getting it into society is going to take a while. So that'll slow it down. Like Reid Hoffman, who's, he's kind of like famous in the space when the original PayPal people, he said, look, even if all cars tomorrow were driverless, right? We don't have all driverless cars yet, but even if we had the technology to make every car driverless, it would take 10 years to make half the cars that we have now driverless, right? So there is kind of time to think through and adapt, but I think there needs to be a little bit more of that thinking through. So, and then debate. I love debate. Anybody wants to talk to me about debate? No, there's no charge to talking about debate. I'll talk about that. But it was, I think we're coming to the end of the time. I just wanted to kind of say those things in the end.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And so I don't know. I want to make sure that you've got time to kind of wrap up. I don't know if you've got any other slides or thoughts, and then we'll definitely kind of segue.
Not much. I guess I only had like, two things, I can stick around for a little bit. I didn't know if you were needing to wrap, but this actually popped up. I was looking at my LinkedIn. I was waiting to pop on while they were talking to you. And, this guy, I have no idea who this guy is or why it got shared, but he was just saying like, oh, some of the kids are learning coding, like, they're messaging even like, well, my God, is this going to be useful for anything? And he's like, well, I don't really know. But he's like, the ones who have had like industry experience, who have like actually learned to do things like kind of on the job. And he gives like some examples. He's like, those are like valuable employees, right? And I think, with some of you may have a lot of students. I don't know a lot about, your students, but if you have students or even in high school, we have these like, work programs. That hasn't been like the traditional route to the, you've always pushed kids, right? It's go to the traditional college, do knowledge work. Like that's how you're going to make the most money. Like that's like, regardless of most money or less money, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with any of that. So, and then someone else I follow, you can follow him. He's, I like this guy because he has a PhD in art, a PhD in AI. So he's always kind of combining the humanistic disciplines with with all his AI knowledge. And he just kind of talks about in like history, like we have been able to, adapt to the needs of industry, right? Now, the ultimate question is raised is like, well, what we've always like, in the Western world, in the stable countries, like for the last 200 years, we've been able to, as technologies changed, new businesses created, and that's raised the demand for human labor. What ultimately becomes the question is like, well, do we need new labor when I come up with a business, right? Like the big bets in Silicon Valley now are like, who's going to build the first billion-dollar company, and they're the only employee, the only human employee. Right. So, those kind of, but that kind of goes back to that like entrepreneurship question. Maybe my student will just like, he's probably not going to be a knowledge worker, but if he can drop enough products in that Instagram feed, he can at least eat. So, all those things, I just think everything is such a transformative technology. Like it's just everything. There's almost like two planning. Like you have your committee of like, okay, like how are we going to get through the semester or like whatever. And then there's your committee of like, how do we really need to think about like redesigning what we're doing? And you don't have to redesign the whole university, right? Because you might do it wrong, right? But like, electives, right? Like those things can be like completely redesigned because generally they don't have as many like, like standards that you might necessarily have to comply with or whatever. But like, how can we, how and where how can we totally think about outside the box? Like, that can just be fun, right? But like, then how can we do some of these things outside the box without like, losing our like, the sanctioning or whatever, right? Like there's kind of a lot more room there to play with probably than, people may think about. But yeah, the increased educational experience, I agree with that too. So that's like another way, like, okay, maybe like, the content, maybe there won't be as much value in all the content knowledge that exists in a university. I hate to say that, but it's possible. But maybe the value, right? That's another place, like the in-person experience, right? Why would it be bad if the best professors are just the ones that relate to kids? Like, what do professors like generally get crap for? Oh, they just want to do research. They don't want to like interact with the kids, right? Like, I'm not saying that's true, but that's the rap, right? And I've certainly had some, right? So, but like, so what if all the best professors like they don't like necessarily, maybe they even know a little less about the field than some other professor, but like it doesn't matter because the AI knows everything, and it's just like the ones who can motivate the kids, interact with the kids, like help know enough obviously to help the kids like learn like with and through like the AI systems. Like why is that a bad thing? Like some people say we'll shift a lot more to caring professions. Human care, like why is that bad? Why is it like right now we think of the like best people in the world as like the smartest? I mean, some people are jerks, but you know what I mean? Like we really value people who are really intelligent. We pay them the most. I mean, that's part of the market, but like that's like, wow, you're like, oh, that person's so smart. How many people did say like, oh, that person is just like so nice? They're like the nicest person, right? It's like, well, why is this bad? Like, what if like the defining distinguishing thing amongst people, because we like to distinguish ourselves, is that they're the most caring? Like, why would it be bad if like we tried to like in school, in kindergarten, they teach you that, right? Like maybe we should teach it for 20 years.
No, I love it. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to share.
Oh, I need to share that thing. I almost forgot.
Yeah. I forgot too.
And while I pull it up, I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, so he's going to provide you guys something pretty awesome here in just a second. But here's what I want to flip what we're going to do. I think I want to give you guys time back in your breakout rooms and your departments just to have some conversation about what we just heard, what we kind of processed, and maybe start to just have some of your own dialogue around these things as we think through some of this work here. And what I want to do from there, then we'll maybe do that for about 10 minutes, come back, and then I want to show you some things of what we can do, other possibilities with some of these AI tools. Yesterday was just laser focused on ChatGPT, but to show some of these other platforms, things for you to kind of tinker with and explore for yourself, and then also show you a couple things about AI research assistants and things of that nature. They're not perfect, just for you to be aware of as we navigate. And then that will set up, I think, a lot of the work for tomorrow as we get into academic integrity, start to think about policies. How do we handle and navigate some of these things, whether it's possible or not? How do we start to dabble and start to figure some of that stuff out?
Okay.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say, and I know you're going to start talking about some of the other models, and some of you like, as you may know, like, there's the free versions, right? And then there's the ones you have to pay $20 a month for. And for like, okay, like, people pay for one, or maybe they don't want to pay the $20 a month. But there's a company called Boodlebox Boodlebox, and it's just boodlebox.ai. And if you go there, you can sign up, and they charge you $20 a month for like you can access them all. But I got them give you a free code. There's a free code in there in the chat. It's like, what did I put? I can't see my chat now. I always when I chat, but it's like EEC or something like that. When you go, you just need to go through the regular checkout process. Like you were gonna pay the $20 a month, and then just put in that code and hit apply, and it'll knock it to zero, and then just hit accept, so it won't charge you anything. And you can use this free for like 30 days and play around with the AIs. You can see on the left, it seems like you're going to talk about these later a little bit more, right? But like, so Chat GPT 4.0, that's like the version of the kind of like their top model, and you can get some of it for free, but this you can just use it all day as much as you want and give you all the answer. O1's the first, like the base reasoning model. The way reasoning works is like before it gives you an answer, it basically like says, well, what are 3 or 4 possible answers? And then reasons itself as to like which answer is the best. That's like a basic way that it works. So it tends to give you a better one. This is Claude Sonnet, and Claude Opus. So they're paid for models. That's really good. Sonnet is really, really good at coding. So if there's any computer people in here who haven't tried that. These are the professional versions of Pro. Gemini, professional versions of Gemini, which is the Google, I find that when I just do the Google search and it gives those answers, sometimes I get a lot of hallucinations, but you don't really get much on the Pro. There's one, if you slide these down, these are some other ones you can play with. I like the Perplexity a lot. You may have heard about this one. It's like in the news, but it does research. It integrates, it's called, what's the name of the search? But basically it tries to figure out what you're looking for. Semantic search. So like in the past, like, you did keyword search. So if you're looking for a book, like the keyword maybe had to be in the title or like whatever how the library cataloged it. This first figures out like what you're trying to look for and then gives you the answers. And then all the links are there. You can click on them. It will sometimes still hallucinate, but I'd say 95% of the time it's right. These are image generators that you can play with. Then they built all these bots, that can help you with advising or like journal editing. I've barely played with these. Help train you with like communication skills. If any of you are in the business department or teach any of these business subjects, you might want to play around with some of these bots. There's a grant writer bot, which I've actually used some that I think pretty good. There's even a dad jokes bot that you can kind of go through. They've created some bots that you can that'll help you for specific purposes. But I think the big thing for you all, if you're just starting to play with this, there is a difference between the freemium and the $20 a month. So you should kind of see that, right? Because you have students. I mean, even a lot of high school students I work with, they did generally one, not more than one, but they have paid versions of these. Most of them ChatGPT, just because that's what everybody knows. But, if I were a school kid, paid Perplexity is probably the best, but they don't know that. Anyhow, you can check that out and you can use it for free for 30 days.
Well, I appreciate you being able to provide that and make that happen. I think it's definitely worth as we explore to kind of see the differences, just as you talked about the free accounts to the paid accounts and being able to have access to all that kind of a one-stop shop just to kind of see the differences as they tinker and kind of go through.
Can I show them one other thing here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I put together this website. So I have these global AI debates. If any of you teach a class and the kids want to write a paper, they can submit it to this thing. I'll send out a little thing that maybe Aaron can circulate rather than explaining it all now. But what I did here that's kind of maybe will be interesting is the AI world. So I clipped out like a lot of videos, just like short clips. We saw the hint one earlier to get like people thinking about like a lot of these issues, right? So, these all came from like larger, like, podcasts that, people don't want to listen to unless you're kind of like me. And then I, added some issues here. These are all like people talking about work and they all have like kind of different perspectives, right? So the former Uber founder who got pushed out of Uber started a restaurant with no employees. And then I had this thing and I can probably just drop the link right here in the thing. In order to help students prepare, I've kind of constructed this. It's a live document. It's 150 some pages at this point, where I kind of go through all the arguments about like some of these main, there's a background so you can learn more about AI, but okay, generative AI in education, energy consumption, water, military, some of the stuff maybe that you talked about this morning. I think I can, that's the sharing. and that link's in the chat. You can check any of those out if you want to learn a little more. I do think that kids do want to talk about these things. Like, if you want to give them a paper and it doesn't matter what the subject content is. Yeah, there's a good chance that kids will write a paper that, you know, they don't just use AI for, because they actually, you know, they care about this. Like, this affects their future. Alrighty, I guess I'll promise I'll stop talking.
No, you're good.
All
You're
right,
good.
thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for
No
some of
problem.
that stuff here. And I'm gonna replace the share here real quick. So let's do this. I'm gonna give you guys definitely give you some processing time. So just a couple things that are in that learning doc. Obviously, he just shared with you that AI or that debate Bible there in the link. He gave you that access to that tool if you want to check out some of those paid features and those things. So we'll kind of let you navigate here in just a little bit in your breakout rooms, kind of where you want to go and maybe explore. Maybe some of you just want to talk and just process all the things that he just shared and kind of figure out what that means for you. But in the learning doc, we'll just kind of combine this and let you kind of pick your area of interest. I have linked in here the other large language model platforms, and those are also in that Boodle box that are similar to ChatGPT, but also have slightly some different features and the way they process and way they do things. You might like one more than the other. I know for me, I prefer Perplexity for like my academic work more than ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT probably 95% of the time, but Perplexity is where I go to get started in a lot of that. Claude's also fantastic. Microsoft has Copilot, which is also phenomenal. So I put some links in there and then just some of their like recent or newer features that you may not see right out of the gate if you haven't used them before. But what I would like to have happen is in that breakout room arrangement document where you guys kind of signed up and organized yourself of the rooms to be in, underneath that, there's just another tab here. And in your conversation, or if you're exploring during your time, if you could just kind of capture on your line questions you have, concerns you have, fears you have, frustrations you have, or maybe ahas or something that you're using and doing in your departments. This is designed here so that, you know, we're not gonna be able to have a chance to do a whole share out with all these groups. There's just not enough time, but there might be something, some sort of conversation or idea or thought that another department could leverage. And then our person that's going to join us tomorrow, her and I are going to meet after this, and we're going to look through those ideas and then try to connect thoughts and ideas, resources, strategy as much as we can to the ideas that you have. So kind of a two-pronged approach here. In this, you can explore the tools, explore that Boodle box, maybe just kind of process some of the stuff that Stefan shared about just AI in general. And maybe you just need to kind of talk through that. But give you here probably to the top of the hour. So 17 minutes to kind of work through that. And we'll bring back maybe some whole group and see if there's any major thoughts or ideas. And then kind of get us set up for the specifics for tomorrow so you can kind of see that. The last thing, not that you have to go do all this either, but I started to compile at the bottom of the learning doc just some things that I've been sharing with schools in the K-12 space around academic integrity, AI literacy, media literacy, things like that. So there are some stuff there that we might touch upon tomorrow in greater detail, but it's down there at the bottom of the learning doc in case you want to kind of scroll through that. So I want to just give you some time there. And obviously we'll be here in the main room if there's some other things, but I want to give you the time, the process. We don't always have enough time to do that with our people. So I'm going to open up the rooms. You guys should all still be placed in there. If you need to get moved, I know there was a couple little adjustments. So if it sticks you to a room you don't want to be in, hopefully by now you kind of know how you can manually move to where you want to go, but I can also help you as well. And we'll give you that time, and I'll close things up here at the top of the hour. So the room should be open, and you should be able to find your people. With that being said, just a chance here, whether if you want to put stuff in the chat or if you want to come off mic, now we kind of have whole group. Are there thoughts, ideas, things, you know, from we've kind of had 2 days here. We've got a little bit of time before we wrap up that is just top of mind that you want to share for other people, because I think it's also important. One, talk within your departments, but then also as an institution here as well. So kind of whole group kind of processing or questions or thoughts. You can either put it in the chat or if you want to come off mute and share wouldn't mind hearing from a few folks here before we call it a morning. Yeah, I do see there in the chat the comment there about thinking about the policies for asynchronous testing. I think that is huge right now for a lot of institutions. Like, how do we even begin to wrap our head around that? I know in his slides, I'll get the actual link where that AI student kind of went through that coursework and nobody caught it. The professor didn't know, the other students didn't know. And so just kind of what does some of this mean as we think about online learning, asynchronous learning, all this kind of stuff where it's not that we're not going to offer it. I don't think that's the practical solution. Obviously, how do we get more people like in human interaction spaces? But what does this look like? And how does that, what's that mean for ourselves, right? That we're ensuring learning's happening and that if a kid walks out with our certifications and credentials and degrees, that they actually have the skills that we say. And man, there's just a lot of really, really kind of deep things that we've definitely got to need to process here as we continue to move forward in this landscape that is not slowing down at all. Yeah, John put in there the idea of teaching skills versus content. I know in the Future of Jobs report that just came out here in January, a lot of those skills that are rising to the surface are like the human skills and that piece. There was a company that I brought in for a computer science AI training here locally that talked to them about the idea that they don't even necessarily need, I mean, it's important to have some sort of coding skill sets, don't get me wrong, but what they're looking for is, can that person communicate? Can that person actually like talk with others and explain how things work? And they're like, we can teach anybody how to code with the right time and obviously money and things like that. Like, but we can't always teach, let's say, those human skills. We don't have time for that. And so there is just lots of interesting things as I'm trying to figure out what's happening across the landscape. It definitely, to me, is some of the things that we've been trying to figure out how to teach. And it brings back, I think, a highlight the need for more of these human type skill sets that we've been trying to figure out how to develop in our students and probably ourselves to some degree.
Hi, this is Susan. It's easier for me to speak than to type in the chat, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking from a logistical standpoint, this is going to be a huge paradigm shift. How do you have any knowledge or you can share with us on how an organization implements from top to bottom, starting with the state all the way down to the organization, a coordinated effort to address AI and the processes and standards by which it will operate moving forward, so that it's just not a frustrating experience for everybody to make decisions to address this, only to have it either impacted negatively by all other organizations that aren't ready to address it.
Yeah, no, I wish I could be like, yes, here's the perfect step-by-step recipe to make that happen. I think you're on to something that's really important. How do we proactively work collectively across all the levels and partnerships and schools and districts and all those things? I know working at the state level, we are working on that policy and guidance. And I think really kind of what we've done yesterday and today, quite honestly, needs to happen more and more. I know it's impossible to find time, but the still 2 years since ChatGPT has emerged on the scene and all the tools that have come with, the amount of people that have not experienced any of this to even know what questions they should be asking. And I don't mean, it's not an insult. It's not I mean, just people's plates are so full. You know, I was in the school district yesterday with all the staff, and less than a third had ever used a AI tool. Now they all had opinions, and we all do, but like as we started to explore, all of a sudden, man, like questions and like, oh man, what is it? What does this mean? What? And it just, so I think it's how do we start to get it out to more people so that we can collectively start asking questions that we don't know that we should be asking. That's kind of what I like with Stefan's work, the stuff that he does. I don't always like walk step in step with his thoughts and ideas, but it makes me think. It makes me like, what does this mean? Like, what if and what are we going to do? Not like, oh, it's the end of the world, but like, but what is the next trajectory step? And so I I'm excited. I mean, even just doing this work here. And then as I go back to my AEA work, going, what does this mean in the K-12 space? So that our kids are equipped to get ready for this next level post-secondary work, that they have the skill sets to continue to navigate this. Like, what are those building blocks? And then what's that look like? Hopefully at the state level as we continue to meet and work and make that stuff happen. So I think it's definitely on the radar for people, and it continues to bloom. I think as stuff continues to show up more and more and more. I think a lot of people thought it hit the peak last year, and they've been proven wrong by how quickly things have advanced here recently. I hope that it continues. I think people realize we've got to do some stuff together, because otherwise we're not going to figure any of this out. But it's a really, really great question and point, Susan. Yeah, Angie, go ahead.
I mean, I can just see like part of maintaining just a healthy organization as we all try to navigate this as humans and start to use these technologies to plan what we want to do as a district moving forward is for everyone to kind of agree we're going to be very transparent about how we're using these tools, for making decisions, and make sure that, like if I type a prompt and this is what I got out and this is what is telling me my plan of action should be, am I asking for more input about whether that was a good prompt? Was there good data that went into making that decision? Where did, it becomes a much more sort of, I think it would be healthy for everyone to get used to using that type of information when they communicate, so we understand where AI is within our decision-making processes. I mean, I think it would make me feel better. That's probably because I'm a scientist. So I like to see what's being used to make decisions, and the best decisions are made with the best data. So I don't know how we implement that as a district, but it's something we need to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's thinking about how do we model that? I mean, I went through just before winter break working with the school district as a very, very small granular example. And I had curated a bunch of different resources that we've used over time with different districts. And I used AI to organize it all. And at the top of the document, I said, I cited like I used ChatGPT to organize this document. And the teachers were like, why do you have that on there? I'm like, because I think it's important. Like, I need you to know that, like, I did not, like, these ideas are from this building, this building, this building. And then I used ChatGPT to curate it into this document. Like, we need to model this. They're like, oh my gosh, like the document had nothing to do with AI. It was all about critical thinking strategies in a classroom. But like that one statement, like they're like, holy cow. And I'm like, you want to know if kids use AI? I think it's only fair then that we model this work. And even that one little line, I've time and time again, how that just like throws people for a loop, And so not that that's exactly what you're saying, Angie, but that idea, right? If we're going to use AI and collect data, let's look at that to make sure that someone else can have a second set of eyes and go, is that really the best data? Is that the valid data? Could someone else see that? And, I think there's definitely that accountability, and just that transparency piece is huge. And those are things that we can model ourselves. We don't need necessarily a whole policy to put that in place. Not that everybody's going to do it, but it's a starting point anyways. So yeah, there is some phenomenal comments and ideas in this chat, and I do not want to ignore it, but I also know I'm 1 minute over time, and time is precious. So I will continue. I'm glad to stay on and talk, but I also know that we are at time and you have a million things on your plate. So I will make sure that if you want to stick around and talk, I'm here. I will also look at all these comments. I'll use this when I have a conversation here with Kimberly a little bit later on today to make sure we can come back to some of these. Obviously, I can't address individual institution stuff, but I think they're valid questions. And I'll look at that document. But I definitely want to thank you for your time today. I know it can be a bit of a head scratcher, but I think it's important head scratching because it leads to some of these thoughts and conversations that are now happening in the chat and maybe in your breakout rooms. That maybe we weren't having before. And what does that mean for us? How do we proactively move forward? Yeah, I agree. Maybe some of that, the message is not excitement, but I think there's opportunities for us to try to find some tangible solutions. And I think there are. Tomorrow, I feel you will walk out much more positive and proactive. Kimberly has things that people are doing at higher ed that are making some sort of positive progress forward. So I don't want you to walk out of today going, oh my gosh, well, what's the point of any of this? You may have felt that, but there are things that we can definitely start to do. So Thank you for your time. Feel free to jump off. I'll stick around too if there's other things you want to talk about. And I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow.